The air in Naples was thick and sweet, heavy with the scent of salt water and gardenias. It was the kind of air that promised luxury and languid afternoons, but for Sarah Jenkins, it felt suffocating. She stood on the marble balcony of their suite at the Ritz-Carlton, watching the Gulf of Mexico turn from aquamarine to a deep, bruised purple as the sun bled out on the horizon. The corporate retreat was in full swing, a symphony of clinking glasses and forced laughter echoing from the grand lawn below. For her husband, Mark, this was a battlefield. For Sarah, it was just another gilded cage. "Are you even listening to me?" Mark's voice, sharp and impatient, cut through her thoughts. He was standing by the mirror, adjusting the knot on his Brioni tie. At 45, he was a man sculpted by ambition, lean, sharp-featured, with a predator's stillness that unnerved junior associates. "I'm sorry, Mark. It's beautiful out here," she said, her voice soft. "It's a swamp, Sarah. A swamp filled with sharks, and I'm about to give the keynote that lands me the senior VP position. The CEO, Mr. Davenport, is here. His wife is here. I need you to be presentable, engaging, not off in your own little world." He ran a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. "And for God's sake, if Davenport's wife asks about family, you pivot. Talk about travel. Talk about my career. Don't start with that wistful look you get." The familiar sting of his words was a dull ache now, a chronic condition she had learned to live with. The wistful look. It was the one that appeared whenever she saw a child toddling on the beach or a mother pushing a stroller. Her yearning for a child was a vast, hollow space inside her, a dream she had quietly packed away like old letters when it became clear Mark viewed it as a liability, a distraction from his climb. He'd once told her, during a particularly cruel argument, that she was too soft, too emotional to be a mother. The words had branded themselves onto her soul. "I know what to do, Mark," she replied, turning from the balcony. She had chosen a simple, elegant navy dress, something that would allow her to blend into the background. She was a prop for him tonight, an accessory meant to signify stability. He gave her a dismissive once-over. "It'll have to do. Just remember, smile, nod, and let me do the talking. Tonight is about closing the deal." He grabbed his keycard and headed for the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. "This promotion means everything. Don't do anything to jeopardize it." He didn't wait for a reply. The door clicked shut, leaving Sarah alone in the opulent silence of the suite. She looked at her reflection in the full-length mirror. A woman of 42, with kind eyes that were starting to show the faintest web of lines at the corners. Lines etched not by laughter, but by years of quiet disappointment. She had given up her own aspirations, her friends, her very essence to support his. And for what? To be told to stand in a corner and look presentable. The humid air suddenly felt cold, and a shiver of profound loneliness ran through her. Tonight, something felt different. The air was charged not with opportunity, as it was for Mark, but with a sense of an ending she couldn't yet name. The ballroom was a galaxy of shimmering gowns and dark, expensive suits. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto tables laden with floral arrangements and gleaming silverware. Sarah sat at a prime table near the stage, a fixed, pleasant smile on her face. She'd made it through the cocktail hour, enduring condescending pats on the arm from Mark's colleagues and their wives, all of them sizing her up, seeing only the wife of a Mr. Davenport, the CEO, had been polite but brief, his eyes scanning the room for more important people to greet. Now Mark was at the podium, bathed in a single flattering spotlight. Now he was in his element, radiating a confident charm that Sarah knew was as carefully constructed as the hotel itself. He moved through his speech with practiced ease, talking about market projections and synergy, his voice a smooth, convincing baritone. The crowd was captivated. "And that brings me to my final point," Mark said, his tone shifting from professional to personal. "Strategy is important, vision is critical, but none of it matters without a solid foundation, a support system that understands its role." He paused, and his eyes found Sarah in the crowd. He gave her a wide, brilliant smile that didn't reach his eyes. "My wife, Sarah, is a perfect testament to that," he continued, a chuckle in his voice. The audience turned to look at her. "She's a wonderful woman, A truly wonderful woman who keeps our home running like a well-oiled machine. Another pause, this one for dramatic effect. It's a good thing, too. Because, as she'll tell you, her real talent is staying in the kitchen where she belongs. Good thing we never had kids. Can you imagine her trying to run a board meeting, let alone a family? The joke landed in the room with a deafening thud of polite sycophantic laughter. Men in tuxedos chuckled, their wives offered tight-lipped smiles. To Sarah, the sound was like shattering glass. A hot crimson wave of humiliation washed over her, so intense it made her dizzy. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, a mixture of pity and amusement. He hadn't just belittled her. He had paraded her deepest pain and his own disdain for it in front of the very people he wanted to impress. He had taken her most vulnerable part and used it as a punchline. Her breath caught in her throat. The room began to shrink, the glittering lights blurring into painful, shimmering spots. She couldn't breathe. She had to get out. Pushing her chair back so quietly it made no sound, she stood up. Mark, still basking in the laughter, didn't even notice. Head down, clutching her small purse like a shield, Sarah slipped between the tables and out a side door that led to a terrace. The sudden quiet of the night was a balm. But as the door swung shut behind her, the first hot tear escaped, tracing a path of shame down her cheek. She walked blindly, away from the ballroom, away from the laughter, her husband's cruel words echoing with the relentless rhythm of the waves crashing on the dark shore below. The manicured lawns of the resort gave way to the soft, untamed sand of the beach. Sarah walked without purpose, letting the gentle tide wash over her strappy heels, not caring that it was ruining them. The moon was a perfect silver dollar in the black velvet sky, casting a path of shimmering light across the water. The sound of the ocean, usually a comfort, did little to drown out the memory of the laughter. Mark's words were a poison, seeping into the cracks of her already fragile self-worth. Too emotional. Stays in the kitchen. Can you imagine? She sank onto the cool sand, wrapping her arms around her knees, finally letting the sobs come. They were ragged, broken sounds of a woman who had just realized the last 15 years of her life had been a lie, she told herself. She hadn't been a supportive partner. She'd been a doormat. She hadn't built a life with him. She had been scenery in his. It was then, in a lull between sobs, that she heard it. A faint mewling cry, almost like a seagull. It was thin and reedy, easily mistaken for the wind. But it came again, more insistent this time. It was a sound of distress, a sound of life. Sarah pushed herself up, her own grief momentarily forgotten, and scanned the dark shoreline. The cry led her toward a thicket of sea grape bushes that bordered the manicured resort property. Tucked away, almost completely hidden from view, was a woven bassinet. It looked like something from a fairy tale, out of place against the modern luxury of the hotel. Her heart hammered against her ribs. With trembling hands, she parted the large, leathery leaves of the bushes. Inside the bassinet, swaddled in a simple, clean white blanket, was a baby. A newborn. Its tiny face was scrunched up, its mouth open in a silent cry that had exhausted its small lungs. For a moment Sarah froze, unable to process what she was seeing. Then a primal, overwhelming wave of instinct washed over her, erasing everything else. She knelt in the sand, her silk dress forgotten, and gently, so gently, scooped the baby into her arms. The infant was impossibly light, warm, and real. As she held the child against her chest, the baby's cries subsided into soft, snuffing sounds. The tiny head, with its tuft of downy dark hair, settled into the crook of her neck. In that instant, the hollow space inside Sarah filled with a fierce, protective love so powerful it stole her breath. This child was alone. This child was in danger. Her own pain vanished, replaced by a singular, crystal-clear purpose. She held the baby tight with one arm and fumbled for her phone with the other. Her fingers were shaking, but her voice, when she spoke to the 911 operator, was steady and clear. "My name is Sarah Jenkins," she said, her eyes fixed on the sleeping face of the infant in her arms. "I'm on the beach at the Ritz-Carlton, and I found a baby." Returning to the hotel suite was like entering a foreign country. 2 sheriff's deputies, a man and a woman with kind, serious faces, had escorted her. The baby, now wrapped in a thick, fluffy hotel towel, slept peacefully in Sarah's arms. The deputies asked questions, which Sarah answered with a clarity that surprised even herself. She was no longer the humiliated wife. She was this child's guardian. The door burst open, and Mark stormed in, his face a mask of cold fury. His eyes flickered from the deputies to the bundle in Sarah's arms, and his jaw tightened. "What in God's name is going on here?" he demanded, his voice low and menacing. He nodded curtly at the officers. "I apologize for my wife. She can be dramatic." "Sir, your wife found an abandoned infant on the beach," the female deputy said calmly, her gaze unwavering. "She did exactly the right thing by calling us." Mark's composure barely cracked. "Of course. A tragedy. Well, I'm sure you have protocols for this. Social services, I assume, will cooperate fully." His words were a masterclass in corporate damage control, all smooth surfaces and professional concern. He wanted them gone. After a few more questions, the deputies left, promising that a representative from Child Protective Services would be in touch shortly. The moment the door clicked shut, Mark's mask of civility dissolved. He turned on Sarah, his voice a venomous hiss. "Are you out of your mind, bringing this situation up to our room, in front of deputies? Do you have any idea how this looks? I just gave the speech of my career, and you're up here creating a scandal." Sarah looked from his twisted, angry face to the peaceful, innocent one sleeping in her arms. The contrast was a physical blow. A baby was alone on the beach, Mark. A tiny baby. What was I supposed to do? "You were supposed to be discreet," he seethed, pacing the plush carpet. "You call the front desk, let them handle it. You don't get your name on a police report. Davenport's room is 2 doors down. This is a disaster." He stopped and pointed a finger at the child. "Give it to whatever social worker they send. I want it gone. Get rid of it. I will not have my promotion derailed by some piece of beach trash you decided to adopt for the night. Get rid of it." The words were so callous, so monstrous that they seemed to suck all the air from the room. It wasn't just that he didn't care about the baby. It was that he saw the child as an inconvenience, an obstacle to his ambition. Something inside Sarah, something that had been cracking and splintering for years, finally shattered. It wasn't a loud, violent break, but a quiet, clean snap. The love she'd held for him, the hope she'd nurtured for their future, died in that moment. She looked at the man she had married and saw for the very first time a complete and utter stranger. A monster. And in the face of his coldness, her own resolve hardened into steel. The social worker, a woman named Maria with tired eyes and a gentle voice, arrived an hour later. She assessed the situation with a professional calm that immediately put Sarah at ease. After seeing the clean, warm, and sleeping baby and hearing the deputy's report of Sarah's clear-headed actions, Maria made a practical decision. "The nearest receiving facility is over an hour away," she explained, filling out a form on a clipboard. "Frankly, this child is safer, warmer, and better cared for right here with you for the night than in a sterile government office while we begin the search. Would you be willing to keep her until morning?" "Yes." "Of course," Sarah said without a second of hesitation. Mark, who had been listening from the entryway with his arms crossed, let out an exasperated sigh, but Sarah ignored him. Maria smiled faintly. "I thought you might say that. We'll list her as Jane Doe for now." She handed Sarah a packet with some emergency formula samples, diapers, and her direct cell phone number. "Call me if anything changes. I'll be back first thing in the morning." As soon as Maria left, Mark threw his hands up. "Unbelievable! I'm going to the lobby bar. I can't be here for this." He grabbed his key and left without a backward glance. The silence that followed was a blessing. The vast, impersonal suite, which had felt like a prison cell just hours before, was transformed into a sanctuary. Sarah's world shrank to the small, precious life in her arms. The baby stirred, her tiny mouth making little rooting motions. Using the formula and a bottle procured from room service, Sarah fed her. She changed the baby's diaper on a soft hotel towel laid across the bed, her movements deft and sure, as if she'd been doing it her whole life. All the love she had stored up for a child of her own, all the maternal energy Mark had belittled and tried to extinguish, came pouring out. She hummed a lullaby she didn't know she knew, her voice soft in the quiet room. She rocked the baby, walking back and forth on the plush carpet, her steps light. She looked down at the infant's face, tracing the perfect shell of her ear, the sweep of her dark lashes against her plump cheek. In her heart she gave the baby a name, Grace. For that's what she felt like. A moment of unexpected grace in a life that had become barren and loveless. For years, Mark had told her she wasn't mother material. But as she held this child, she knew, with a certainty that resonated in her very bones, that he was wrong. This was who she was. This was who she was always meant to be. The night passed in a blur of feedings and quiet cuddles, and for the first time in over a decade, Sarah Jenkins felt a profound sense of peace. She was no longer just Mark's wife. She was Grace's protector. Morning sunlight streamed into the suite, painting stripes of gold across the floor. The baby, whom Sarah still thought of as Grace, was sleeping soundly in a makeshift crib Sarah had fashioned from a dresser drawer padded with soft blankets. Sarah hadn't slept, but she felt energized, alive with purpose. A knock at the door startled her. It was Maria, the social worker. But she wasn't alone. She was accompanied by a hotel manager and a distinguished-looking man in his late 60s. He was tall and silver-haired, dressed in expensive linen slacks and a polo shirt, but his face was etched with sheer panic and exhaustion. His eyes, red-rimmed and frantic, immediately found the makeshift crib. His eyes, is she, he stammered, his voice thick with emotion. Dr. Harrison, the manager said softly. Perhaps we should. But the man, Dr. Harrison, was already moving past them, his gaze locked on the baby. He stopped beside the drawer, his hands hovering over the sleeping infant, as if he were afraid to touch her. A choked sob escaped him. Sarah stepped forward gently. She's safe. She's been sleeping all night. Dr. Harrison turned to her, his eyes swimming with tears. Thank you, he whispered, his voice cracking. My God, thank you. He looked back at the baby, then at the social worker. She is my granddaughter. Her name is Lily. Over the next half hour, the story came tumbling out. Dr. Arthur Harrison was a world-renowned pediatric surgeon from Boston. He was a widower, and his only son had passed away 2 years prior. Desperate to have a piece of his son live on, he had arranged for a gestational surrogate to carry his son's child. The surrogate, a young woman he'd thought was stable, had given birth 2 days ago and suffered a sudden and severe postpartum mental health crisis. Last night, in a state of psychosis, she had fled the private clinic, taking the baby with her. Dr. Harrison, who had been staying at the same resort for a medical conference, had been organizing a frantic private search all night, fearing the worst. The police found the surrogate's car abandoned miles from here, he explained, his voice ragged. We had no idea where Lily was. We thought... He couldn't finish the sentence. He looked at Sarah, his expression one of profound, life-altering gratitude. You found her. You saved her life. He reached into the drawer and, with the practiced, gentle hands of a surgeon, lifted his granddaughter. He held Lily to his chest, burying his face in her blanket, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs of relief. Sarah watched the scene, her heart aching with a mix of joy for them and a quiet sorrow for herself. For one night, she had a daughter. Now she had to give her back. But as Dr. Harrison looked up, his eyes meeting hers over Lily's sleeping head, she saw not just gratitude, but a deep, immediate respect. He saw her, not as a prop or a problem, but as the woman who saved his entire world. After the initial emotions subsided, the social worker, Maria, confirmed Dr. Harrison's identity and legal guardianship. Formalities were handled, and the hotel staff, sensing the gravity of the situation, offered Dr. Harrison and Sarah the use of a private lanai overlooking the ocean to speak. Mark was still nowhere to be seen, a fact for which Sarah was immensely grateful. They sat in comfortable wicker chairs, a gentle sea breeze stirring the air. Lily slept peacefully in a proper bassinet the hotel had provided, nestled between them. I can't find the words to thank you, Sarah, Dr. Harrison began, his voice now steady and filled with warmth. What you did? It was everything. Anyone would have done the same, Sarah demurred, though she knew in her heart it wasn't true. Mark wouldn't have. A shadow passed over Dr. Harrison's face. "No," he said quietly. "Not everyone. I need to confess something. I was also a guest at last night's corporate dinner. I was on the terrace having a cigar when your husband gave his speech." Sarah's blood ran cold. He had heard. He had been a witness to her ultimate humiliation. "I heard what he said," Dr. Harrison continued, his eyes full of compassion, not pity. "It was a disgusting, cruel thing to say. I almost walked in and confronted him myself. The way he spoke of you, and then to find out that just an hour later, you were on a dark beach showing more compassion and maternal instinct than I've seen in my 30 years as a pediatrician. The irony is staggering. He is a fool of the highest order. His validation was a balm on a raw wound. To be seen, to have her pain acknowledged by this kind, intelligent man, was more healing than 1,000 apologies from Mark ever could be. "Maria, the social worker, mentioned your background," he said, changing the subject. "She said you used to manage a nonprofit community arts program before you were married. She said, and that you told her your dream was to one day open a full-service youth center." Sarah was taken aback. She had mentioned it in passing, a forgotten dream she'd voiced in a moment of emotional honesty. "Yes, a long time ago." "Dreams don't expire, Sarah," he said, his gaze intense. "I am a very wealthy man, and I owe you a debt I can never truly repay, but I would like to try." He leaned forward. "I want to fund your youth center. All of it. The land, the building, the staffing for the first 5 years. Consider it seed money, an investment not in a charity but in a person of extraordinary character. I want my granddaughter to grow up knowing the story of the woman who saved her, and I want that woman to have the life she deserves, not the one she's been tolerating." The offer was so immense, so life-altering, that Sarah couldn't speak. Tears welled in her eyes, but for the first time in years, they were not tears of sorrow or humiliation. They were tears of shock, of gratitude, and of the dawning, brilliant light of freedom. He wasn't just offering her money, he was offering her a future, a way out, a new beginning, forged in the crucible of one terrible, wonderful night. Empowered by Dr. Harrison's belief in her, Sarah made a call. By noon, a top-rated Naples divorce attorney had emailed her the preliminary paperwork. The clarity she felt was absolute. There was no going back. Meanwhile, Dr. Arthur Harrison made a call of his own. As it turned out, the CEO of Mark's company, Mr. Davenport, had been his roommate at Harvard Medical School before Davenport switched to business. They hadn't spoken in years, but some connections never fade. Mark finally returned to the suite just after 2 p.m., his face pale and his eyes blazing with a new kind of fury. "I've been fired," he spat out, throwing his keycard onto the glass table, where it skittered and fell to the floor. "Davenport called me into his suite, fired me on the spot, said I violated the company's code of conduct, that I was a reputational risk. He mentioned an unfortunate incident at the gala. This is your fault. That baby, that scene you made." Sarah stood calmly by the window, the divorce papers held loosely in her hand. She felt nothing. No fear, no satisfaction, just a quiet finality. It had nothing to do with the baby, Mark, and everything to do with you. "What are you talking about?" he snarled. "Dr. Harrison, the baby's grandfather, was at the dinner last night. He heard your speech," she said, her voice even. "He also happens to be an old and very dear friend of Mr. Davenport. It seems your CEO doesn't appreciate his executives publicly humiliating their spouses and boasting about their cruelties." The color drained from Mark's face as the pieces clicked into place. He stared at her dumbfounded, as if seeing her for the first time, not as a mouse, but as an adversary. You did this," he stammered. "No, Mark," she said, walking toward him and placing the folded divorce papers on the table next to his discarded key. "You did this to yourself. You were so busy climbing you never bothered to see who you were stepping on. This is where I get off." She picked up her purse and the small overnight bag she had already packed and walked toward the door. She didn't look back at his sputtering, defeated rage. She didn't need to. She walked out of the suite, out of the hotel, and into the bright Florida sunshine, breathing in the sweet, clean air of her new life. 6 months later, Sarah stood on a dusty 3-acre plot of land in her hometown. A large sign was staked in the ground, its bold letters proclaiming, future home of the Lily Harrison Youth Center. She held a silver shovel, ready for the groundbreaking ceremony. Beside her, Dr. Harrison held a giggling, thriving baby Lily in his arms. He had become her mentor, her friend, her family. The press was there, snapping photos. She was no longer Sarah Jenkins, the timid wife. She was Sarah Whitaker, her maiden name restored, the respected director of a multi-million-dollar foundation. As she plunged the shovel into the earth, she smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. She had lost a husband, but had found a family. Radiant smile. And in saving one small life, she had finally saved her own.